Bill Tytla was one of the very influential animators during the golden age of animation. He was actually later known as animation's Michelangelo, and a quote from our book, Hollywood Animation, says, Walt had tremendous respect for Bill. So this is how he was able to make such a large impact on the animation industry. So he was born in 1904 in New York. Both of his parents were from Ukraine. He always liked drawing as a young kid and was inspired by Gertie the dinosaur and actually remembers going to viewing. He dropped out of high school to further pursue art and took classes at the New York Evening School of Industrial Design. He ended up going to court to a truancy trial for not showing up to class, but the judge, after seeing his artwork, decided that he made the correct decision and that he should drop out of high school in order to pursue art. At 16, he then worked for Paramount Animation, helping make the lettered title cards. He actually did not like animation and wanted to pursue the fine arts, but him and his family needed money, so he worked as an animator at Paul Terry's animation studio on the Aesop Fable series. He created very high quality animation, and he was very, very fast at animating, so he became one of the highest paid animators. He ended up working there for 5 years, but decided he still wanted to pursue the fine arts and become a master of the fine arts. So at the age of 25, he moved to Paris to study the fine arts. His mentor was Boardman Robinson, and he studied for 18 months there before moving back. And with this new study in Paris, he opened his eyes up more to animating again. And he realized that he really wanted to make 3D art and he wanted to make his art move. So he decided to go back to the same company he was at, Paul Terry's animation studio, and began animating again. And he became best friends with one animator named Art Babbitt. And Art Babbitt in 1932 ended up moving to the other coast to Disney and was really trying to convince Tytla to move there too. But it wasn't until 1934 that Tytla got persuaded and moved to Disney to try it out. He really didn't want to move because during this time, it was the Great Depression and he didn't want to take too many risks, and Disney was offering a lower paying salary. But once he got to Disney, he was put on some assignments in 1935, including Clara Bellecow, the Angel and Devil Cakes, and most importantly, Cock of the Walk. So Cock of the Walk is right here. It is a silly symphony and just a scene of two roosters dancing. This film drew a lot of attention, especially from Walt, and it was applauded around the studio. So after this film, he ended up getting assigned to be one of the first animators on Snow White. So he was assigned specifically to animate the dwarves, along with Fred Moore. The reason he was specified to animate the dwarves is because he was really good at animating and conveying emotion, which was kind of revolutionary at this time. A quote from our book, it says, he did a parody of method acting. He had to act out every scene in his room. So this is how he was able to convey such strong emotions. Another quote from our book was, from all accounts, Tytla was overflowed with emotion. So these two characteristics really helped him make the emotion the character was feeling very clear on screen. And the dwarves, this was very important because each dwarf had to have its own specific emotion that was constantly being showed. And the hardest dwarf to animate was Grumpy. He was the hardest to animate because he had to have such a large range of emotion. They didn't want him just being grumpy all the time. They wanted to show that he had a soft side. So a great example of how difficult Grumpy was to animate was when Snow White kisses Grumpy on the head. And you can see Grumpy going straight from being angry and resenting Snow White to then blushing and then being mad that he was showing his soft side. And this clip was actually one of the best examples of animation at the time, and still to this day is a very impressive part of animating. So after this great success with animating Snow White, he did go on to continue to animate some other other characters in Disney, including, here they are, Stromboli, the Chernobyl from Fantasia, and this was a very impressive animation on his part, and finally Dumbo. So he ended up actually leaving Disney after the strike. A quote from one of his junior animators saying that due to the strike, Bill was aloof and he just stayed by himself. He didn't mingle with the boys very much. He just came to work and stayed in his room and went home. Additionally, he had a farm in Connecticut that his wife really wanted to move to, so Paul Terry was able to convince Tytla to move back to the East Coast and work just outside of New York. And he worked as a director in the Paul Terry Animation Studio, but he ended up getting let go due to the Screen Cartoonists Guild demanding higher wages. Tytla was one of the higher paid animators, so he was one of the first to get let off. After that, he moved to Famous Studio in 1944. Once again, he was a director here. A quote from our book was in Tytla's film For Famous, he did nothing that echoed his work in Disney, except in the weakest ways, through imitation. And another quote, Walt Disney's greatest animator was simply swallowed up. So he really had struggle getting back on his horse and animating to the same degree that he did before. He did direct some impressive films such as Popeye. He ended up also joining the Tempo production in the early 1950s and worked on some advertisements. And the last film he worked on, he wanted to animate, he didn't want to direct, so it was The Incredible Mr. Limpet. But near the end of his life, he started to have many small strokes and ended up going blind in his left eye. He tried to get involved with Disney one more time before his death, but that never happened, and he died in 1968. So that is